The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, Game Toppers, awkward interviews with your girlfriend, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's The Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Kennerspiel winner, The Quacks of Quedlinburg. Then they'll look back at the review of Ex Libris in their Dukes Double Take. And finally, it's a special guest appearance from Alex's girlfriend, Abby, for some reason. And now, The Dukes of Dice.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And also Alex.
And you're joining us for episode 193, named by Jesse Metcalf, Cooking the Books. We're cooking the books, Alex, which I think is a perfect title for this episode.
Now, wait a minute. As my attorney, is it a good idea that you just made an admission on air that we are cooking the books here at the Dukes of Dice?
I am not a tax attorney.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not an accountant, so I have no knowledge of federal or state income tax law. Actually, I have zero knowledge of Missouri state tax law.
Okay.
But I've got a decent amount of IRS knowledge. But anyway, this episode named Cooking the Books because we're talking about Ex Libris, a book about building a library. And then we're also alchemists cooking up a brew, a potion in the Quacks of Quedlinburg. So I think kudos to Jesse for such an excellent suggestion. In fact, Alex, it was unanimous between us. That was both of our first pick.
Yes, and to be clear, since we tend to get votes from guests, and we do have a guest later on this episode, in an interview I've already recorded, her vote was for another one on the list, but she was outvoted. Abby was outvoted, and we'll tell you what the rest of the top six were at the end of the episode.
Yes, indeed. So, Alex, how have you been?
I've been fine. It's been very, very, very gloomy here in St. Louis. Today it's about 33 degrees, cloudy, not snowy. It was supposed to be a bit snowy today, but it hasn't started doing that. It hasn't really had any precipitation. It's just been kind of whatever. But last weekend, we were cramped up inside all weekend long because we got about 10 inches of snow, 11 inches of snow here in St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
Which, yeah, a ton. It was an absolute ton, which was great. We went out to the park. We played in the snow. And then by Sunday, we were over it. It was just, this is enough. We've had enough snow. We've had enough of this. But it's been kind of cloudy, gloomy, just the kind of weather you want to fly away from. And I don't know if there's any intent to do that anytime soon. But yeah, it's gloomy here. But I'm doing well. I'm doing all right.
You know, sometimes you just have to put up with the weather where you live.
That's true. I guess so.
Oh, man, it's cloudy out today. I better get on a flight to Hawaii. This is unacceptable.
Well, if I had a private plane, I could do similar things. But nope, I just have to kind of make my way through winter. I will be very excited when we finally hit spring.
Okay, fair enough.
How about you?
I've been, I got to tell you, I have been so busy at work. I mean, things were kind of weird in December, and they always kind of slow down. But man, January has just been a kick in the pants. Wait, is that a good thing or a bad thing or neutral? It's been really busy, which is good, but also hectic and stressful. In fact, we're recording a couple days after our initial plan to record, just because it was about 5:45, 5:50 at night. And I was just leaving the courthouse, which is an hour away from my house, give or take. And I'm like, hey, Alex, I got stuck in court way longer than I thought, so can we postpone this? So appreciate your flexibility on that. But that's just a microcosm of what this month has been like work-wise for me. So, which is good.
You're making money. Have you hired any help yet? You got some help on board?
I haven't hired anyone new yet. We're waiting probably till like March or so. Well, Alex, with all that busyness, I've had little time to play non-magic related and non-review games.
Now, wait, prior to us jumping on, you said you wanted to provide some amount of reassurance to listeners that this would not become the Magic the Gathering and GMT podcast.
Right.
So good luck with that, because I think the trend for the past, I don't know how many number of months, has been very much towards both of those directions.
Well, I think I only mentioned Magic last episode for the first time when I started playing Magic: The Gathering Arena, which I won't go into a huge thing on that. But then, like, for example, this last Wednesday, normally Dukes of Dice game night, I was unable to attend because we had a function for Mariah. She has been admitted to a school program for her first year in college next year. It's really an internship program where she's going to have the opportunity to shadow a surgeon and or a nurse. And so there was an induction ceremony that we went to. So very good reason to be away from gaming for that. And then the week before on Wednesday, I got in a bunch of plays of Quacks for the review, and I've gotten subsequent plays of that in. And then we also played a game of Space Corp, a GMT game, which was my number 2 game of the year.
Space Corp. Were you the prosecutor or the defense?
I was neither, because it was Space Corp with a P. But yeah, it's still one of my top games of the year. I'll have a better idea in a couple months whether that or Teotihuacan. Speaking of Teotihuacan, Alex, are you going to try and get some plays of that in so maybe we can review it?
So I have access to a copy. We made a game trade for it at a convention at Essen. We swapped a copy of one of our Monochromatic Wolf games for a copy of that, and it has been sitting at Josh's house ever since. I am due in a couple of weeks to go over there, but I think that would be after the review period. At some point we might get enough plays in for Teotihuacan. I think if I made that request, we could maybe make that happen.
Because our good buddy Nick, he's gotten a couple more plays of it in, and he's like, hey, if you need someone to sit in on the review, he'd be happy to. So he's standing in the wings, Alex, just ready to pull you out of the reviewer seat.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, if he wants to do that, I'm totally game. Won't be the first time and won't be the last time.
Well, but there's a chance. I think you'll like this game. I really do think you'll like this game.
Okay. Oh, how about this? Let's make this declaration right now.
Okay.
Episode 194 will feature a review of Teotihuacan.
Okay.
And I will either have gotten a play of it in and maybe make an appearance, or I will not have gotten any plays in, and I will sit out that part of the episode.
Okay, you just created a logistical nightmare.
Yay!
Because Nick travels a lot, so I don't know. Well, okay, we'll see. We'll figure it out. One way or another, we'll figure it out.
I made the promise to our listeners.
Yes, a promise on my behalf, essentially, to get it figured out logistically how to make this recording happen, given Nick's very busy work schedule and frequent out-of-town traveling.
He's got Skype. I mean, I'm not in your town. We record together. It works out.
No, you fly in every week or every other week. Don't ruin the illusion, Alex.
Well, that would have made you rescheduling our podcast recording because of your court appointment incredibly inconvenient if that were actually true. So I'm very angry at you.
I paid for the change and never mind. Not important. Alex, what games have you been playing?
So, and it's interesting. We sort of both had an overlap of not a ton of new plays necessarily. I too have been properly preparing for the review because prior to a couple of weeks ago, my only play of Quacks of Quedlinburg was one with completely incorrect rules, and I'll talk about that more in the review itself. But yeah, I've gotten in a lot of plays of old standbys, whether that be another play of Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Just played that the other night over at Jamie's and still really enjoy that game. Got in plays of with Abby, my girlfriend. We played Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden. We've been playing a ton of Klask. We've been playing Hanamakoji, and we've been playing Fox in the Forest. So a lot of those old standbys have come up, and not necessarily a ton of new games. But I did get in one new play the other night, Sean, of an oldie, a game that I would consider old school by our Cult of the New Standards, a game that came out way back in the year 2010. 2010 release, a game called Perpetual Motion Machine. From Bezier Games, designed by Ted Alspach. Sean, are you familiar with this game?
No, I'm not at all.
Okay. So, Sean, this is an engine-building game featuring poker hands. Has that caught your attention?
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting.
Okay. Now, Perpetual Motion Machine is rated on BGG. Just give it a guess. What do you think it's rated on BGG?
5.2.
No, it's not that low, but it is a 6.
6, okay.
A straight 6.0, weight of 1.64 out of 5. All right, here's how the game works. You are trying to build poker hands to play to not only build your engine, but also play out cubes you need to win the game. Your objective is to play out all of your cubes, and your board has certain actions. On your turn, you can either play out a hand of poker cards to get the benefit and play out a cube, or you can draw cards based on what your draw rules are. So, for instance, my draw rule might say, whenever I draw 2 cards face up and 1 card face down. So I draw 2 from this kind of set of cards available. I think it's 4 cards you have out there, and then 1 card from the deck, and then reduce down to my hand size. So, for instance, in this game, a 3 of a kind reflects how many cubes you can bring from the sort of supply, your supply of cubes you don't have access to, but you need to get rid of, into your available pool. So anytime you play 3 of a kind, you're increasing your capacity for bringing cubes in an action. That's an action you can take as well, by the way, is moving cubes from not available to available. If you play a straight, you increase your hand size. That's pretty cool. If you play a flush, you increase the number of cards you can draw face down. And if you play a full house, you can increase the number of cards you can draw face up. If you play two pair, you can get rid of 2 cubes, which is a nice big deal. But that's the only. It doesn't give you any ongoing benefit. You just, congrats, you played 2 pairs. So that's the gist of the game, Sean. You are drawing cards, building your hands, playing them out to the table. And it works. It's all right. I played this one with 3 players, but I can see why it might have some issues on ratings. The variability in this game is not supremely high. How you're supposed to start is you start with 2 cubes. So you start with either an increased hand size and an increased ability to draw face-up cards, or you start with an increased ability to draw face-down cards and increased ability to move cubes down, or some mix of those things. But there's a decent amount of luck. There's a decent amount of a runaway leader issue where once someone gets ahead, there isn't really any way to drag them back into the pack. And it's sort of a rich get richer game. It's luckily not too long, but I don't know if I'd recommend people necessarily seeking this one out. I know it sounds intriguing on its face, and I'd imagine you were intrigued, Sean, because you tend to like games featuring poker mechanics, but it doesn't have any of the real bluffing elements of poker that make it so engaging.
Sure.
It's just using sort of poker hands as a way to trigger into the engine building. There's probably a reason this one hasn't caught on as a classic, but it was interesting to try it out nonetheless. So that's Perpetual Motion Machine from Ted Alspach and Bezier, a 2010 release. Sean,
yeah,
you mentioned you haven't been playing a ton, but what have you been playing?
So I did play and have been playing plenty of Magic: The Gathering Arena. There, in fact, is a brand new set that just came out, Ravnica Allegiance. The last set that just came out focused on the 5 of the 10 guilds that I'd mentioned, I think, in the last episode. Basically, there are 10 2-color combinations. There are 5 colors of Magic, and so there are 10 2-color combinations that are these guilds on this magical plane of Ravnica. So this new set, Ravnica Allegiance, is focusing on the other 5 guilds: Gruul, Azorius, Simic, Rakdos, and Orzhov. And what's cool is they each have their own new mechanic, which is always really interesting. I mean, that's one of the things that Magic has done to stay fresh, is they introduce new mechanics that may just be slight twists on old mechanics or something really innovative. I mean, there's so much innovation, but then they also do a good job for the most part of keeping all of these mechanics limited within a particular format of play. Right. So, and I mentioned this a little bit last episode, so I don't want to go too much into that. But yeah, this just came out Thursday night, the night we were supposed to record, Alex. So instead of coming home and recording, I came home and I did a sealed deck tournament on Magic Arena. So sealed deck, Alex, I think, do you know what that is?
Not a clue.
So you open up 6 packs. You have 6 packs of cards, 15 cards in a pack, 1 rare, 3 uncommons, and the rest commons per pack. And from that, you build a deck that has about 22 or 23 cards plus the rest lands. And from there, you play, I think it's, I can't remember how many it's best of, But yeah, I've done that twice so far. The first one, I did terrible. I had a terrible pool of cards. Basically, your rares, you're looking for bombs, and a bomb is like a card that is just really good. Your opponent has to answer it, otherwise you stand a really good chance of winning. And generally, if you have some good bombs, hopefully you have a bunch of good cards in those colors of your bombs to support that. This first pool of sealed I had, that was the opposite. I had no bombs, number one. All of my rares were not supported by colors in, quality cards in the colors. So I did not do well. The second seal that I did last night, I wound up winning. I won the whole thing. Well, it's kind of weird how it works, but I won the maximum number of games I'm allowed to win to get the maximum prize, if that makes sense. I don't want to get too much into the weeds there, because I had a bomb and I had good supporting cards for it. It was really awesome. And then this morning, since usually if we record on Saturdays, we record fairly early Saturday morning, but you needed to record in the afternoon. So I said, hey, I'll go ahead and now draft some Ravnica Allegiance, and this is where you get 15 cards, one pack at a time. You pick one card and shift it, like we typically draft in board games. And then you build a deck from that. So there's a little bit more focus there. Think of Terraforming Mars, Alex, right? A draft compared to a no draft. You have a little bit more control in the draft because you're seeing more cards and you have control of what you're picking, as opposed to a sealed deck where it's just like, here's your cards, do with it what you will. And right now, I've had to pause that. I am one win away from winning the whole thing, quote unquote, again, to get max prize. So, is there any chance, Alex, for $0 that you would jump on Magic the Gathering Arena?
Sure, there's a chance. If I felt I understood the sets and the rule set well enough, if I had someone holding my hand, I guess there's certainly a chance. I'm not gonna, on my own volition, drop money in it.
Sure.
But hey, if Keyforge can capture my attention, and Android Netrunner off of a play can capture my attention, I think the mechanics of it are something I potentially might enjoy. But yeah, I mean, I think if someone's willing to kind of show me the ropes, it's something I would be willing to try. Yeah, no doubt.
I can hold your hand, Alex.
Oh, would you do that?
Because you could play each other. Like you could choose who you're playing. Most of it's like just you play random people, but there's some ways with a constructed deck to play each other. And I can walk you through the ropes. I can hold your hand through this process.
Are you sure you don't want to just have someone to beat up on?
No, I don't need that, Alex. I'm doing just fine.
That's from what you're describing, it sounds like it.
Well, limited. I'm doing very well. Constructed, I'm going to have to really work. There's 9 days left in the preseason, or 10 days left in the preseason, and I'm still like a middle gold tier, and I need to get up to platinum. So I have to really grind at that to make that happen in the next 9 days or so.
Now, what is the end? Like, let's say you keep winning.
Yeah.
Right. Sean Ramirez just keeps crushing it. No one stands in his way. All fear him. Is there a way you can actually make money off of this?
Yes, but I'm not going to do that because this is part of the new. Wizards of the Coast has kind of reformatted their Pro Tour. It's now called Mythic Tournament or something. I forget what it's called, but they've kind of done some rebranding, and there is a pathway through Arena to be part of their $10 million prize pool, but split up over multiple Pro Tour events. And I mean, there are ways to make money in Magic, and typically it is when you are a pro player and you do well enough that you get invites and airfare to these events where you can win money. But typically, most of the pro players have made a lot of their money through secondary means that supports what they're doing. Like they open, like for example, there's the pro Luis Scott Vargas, and he opened up and runs channelfireball.com, which sells singles, has a bunch of strategy stuff, and so he makes money that way. And that's what a lot of pros have done. Other pros have gone into game design, like Brian Kibler was a pro, and he had a hand in designing Ascension and those games. So long story short, no, I'm not. My end goal is not to make money doing this. My end goal is to continue playing, continue collecting cards, continue doing drafts, which cost money in real life to do, but with as little monetary input from me as possible. Because there's this thing called EV, expected value. And so when I pay 1,500 gems, which is like 750, I think, if I do well enough, I can break even, get my gems back, and get a bunch of new cards, so I can then build constructed decks. But if I do well enough, I get extra gems on top of it. And so even if you're like at a 60% win rate, which doesn't sound great, you have some pretty good expected value where you can just continually do this with little to no additional monetary input, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So for me, it's just experiential, right? It's just being able to play Magic at the drop of a hat, not having to go to a card shop, not having to, because man, Alex, I got to tell you, I own so many paper Magic cards. And if I'm looking for a particular card, if it's a high value card, I almost certainly know where it is. If it's a more obscure card, it's going to take me forever to find it. And even though I have actually a pretty decent organization system for them, but the ability to do this and to play these pretty quick games and to get a lot of good experience doing it is, I think, pretty awesome. So that's my end goal, Alex, is to not end and not goal, but just keep doing it.
Now, you could be a Magic the Gathering attorney.
I don't know. I feel like Wizards of the Coast has its own in-house counsel, so I'm not sure.
No. You're an attorney for players. You represent pro players. You represent their interests. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
That's the plan. I'll work on that.
I'm on board with your plan.
So that's really all I've been doing.
Well, I already listed all I've been doing, so...
Oh, man.
That's, yeah. Again, I haven't... It's not for lack of trying. I've been playing a decent amount of games. It's just hasn't been a lot of new games, necessarily.
Well, so to pad our episode length a little bit, here's something I'm going to do, Alex. I'm going to give our buddy Rory a call, because he just called me. Because what we're supposed to do... hear it ringing?
Oh, boy. Oh, we're going to have all sorts of special guests on this episode.
What we're supposed to do tomorrow is we're supposed to get up early to play Paths of Glory. Hey, Rory, just so you know, you're on the podcast right now.
Hold on. Can I get a doppio espresso with one pack of sugar in the raw? And then could you pull it when I get there? Okay, thanks. All right, Sean, go ahead.
Hey, you're on the podcast right now.
That's hilarious.
So listeners will remember Rory owns Empire Board Game Library, and he's been on the show numerous times. So I had just texted Rory before we started to see if we were still on for our Paths of Glory game in the morning, and Rory called me back, which is not a good sign. So Rory, are we playing Paths of Glory tomorrow?
No, because I'm in the playoffs for the Super Bowl, and I have other reasons. I have Twilight Imperium 4 group scheduled for Martin Luther King Day on Monday, which you will not be attending, apparently.
Oh, my goodness. I am so disappointed.
So it's partially your fault.
What about Combat Commander? It's shorter. Can we do Combat Commander?
I can do Combat Commander. Really, the first game starts at 1 o'clock.
Perfect.
I just want to make sure. Yeah, I'm totally cool with that. I would do Paths of Glory if we could be done by 1. But
no, that's not going to happen.
You're willing to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning.
We still want it to be done by 1. All right, let's do Combat Commander.
Okay, perfect. That sounds good. So are we live on the show?
Yeah, we're live on the show.
Everybody just heard my Starbucks order?
Yeah.
So, Rory, with your Broncos not even making the playoffs, why are you even watching these games?
Let him know that's a good question. I still like watching football, but you're right. It's an incredibly disappointing year. And to be completely honest with you, I hardly like any of the teams that are going forward.
Bummer.
I mean, it sounds like you should be playing Paths of Glory. I'm just going to throw that in there for Sean.
Maybe, but I do want to watch the football games.
All right. All right, I'll see you at 8 for some Combat Commander then.
Is it 8 o'clock or do you want to do 9 o'clock since it's combat?
Let's do 9.
Okay. All right, sounds good. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
All right, later.
Okay, bye.
Who else should I call to pad our runtime, Alex?
No, I think it's good because I have pre-recorded an interview with Abby, my girlfriend.
Yeah.
So why don't we head over to that instead of the news?
Let's do that then.
Well, I made the promise on the guild that I'd get Abby on the show, but she looks like she is regretting this immediately. How are you, Abby?
I never promised to be on the show. You promised people, and I think you asked me, do I want to be on the show? And I said, maybe, with a whole lot of A's in the maybe.
What did that sound like?
Say, no, I don't need to embarrass myself like that.
So for folks who don't know you, because that would be just about everyone on who's listening, who is Abby? Who is my girlfriend Abby? Or excuse me, Abby, my girlfriend.
I'm no longer Abby Tinder. I've been upgraded. Appreciate it. I'm Abby. This is very weird introducing myself to you, who already knows me. My hands are all clammy. This is very weird. I don't like this. What am I supposed to say?
Nothing. I'll ask you a couple questions. All right. Board games. So what did you play prior to meeting me?
Cranium, Scattergories, Euchre, not really a board game. Ticket to Ride one time with my sister and Adrian.
How did you like the one play of Ticket to Ride you got?
It was cool, but Ticket to Ride goes in my rules of games I don't like, where I don't like if you've played it before, you're automatically going to beat me. And Ticket to Ride is one of those games. And so Jana and Adrian beat everyone. And my dad didn't like that at all, which makes it a not fun game when no one in the family is happy.
For folks who don't know, Jana is her sister and Adrian is her sister's husband, so her brother-in-law. So I have introduced you to the wonderful world of board games as early as our very, very first date at Pieces here in St. Louis. And you have accumulated some favorites. Describe what makes a favorite Abby board game. What kind of game is likely to tickle your fancy?
Simple rules, but thinky. So, and you also can't totally beat me. I'm not allowed to curse, am I?
No.
You can't kick my butt at these games the first time we play them. Like, just because you've already played the game, you'll automatically win.
Yeah, and you have some forgiveness for a first play where you're sort of grasping things, but then the second play, if you don't have it down enough to be competitive at least, it's going to be a problem.
Yes, 100%.
And that has led to Hanamakoji, Mr. Cabbage Heads, Vegetable Garden, Fox in the Forest. Those are some favorites. There have also been some games that have left a very bad taste in your mouth. What was your worst play experience with me? Not chess. Chess at the World Chess Hall of Fame here in St. Louis does not count, where you threw your king at me as your way of surrendering the game. That doesn't count. I'm not talking about that play. I'm talking about a board game play.
That was a pretty bad game. That awful train one, I don't know what it is with you guys in train themes, but they should stop pronto. What was that one called?
Steamrollers.
That one was bad. Very bad.
It's no longer in my collection. It just went to a member of the Duchy because I don't know when I would have ever played it again. And it was an in-demand enough game. I liked the game a good amount, but that was not an Abby-friendly experience.
No, that was terrible. Also, Bushido. That was very bad. We didn't even play that game. I think we got through 2 turns, and I was like, no, I'm not into this one.
I cut it off. You were going to be nice enough to finish it out. By the way, that was her dropping the monochromatic wolf plug, not me dropping the monochromatic wolf plug, and it was not a positive plug, so I think that's fine.
I didn't know I wasn't allowed to plug your own games, so no one told me these rules, and I don't actually listen to your podcast in my free time, so.
That's a shocking confession. I'm stunned. It was kind of funny because it was at least me telling you that I did podcasting that was one of the reasons that I think you kept talking to me on Tinder.
Yeah, that's interesting. You also seem very passionate about things, one of which is board games, and there's some aspect of jealousy to that you found a thing you're passionate about and you go after that. Want to keep talking to you.
Now, you have had, in the time that I've known you, some overall critiques or criticisms of the board game hobby. In terms of, run me through. What are some beefs, some Abby beefs that you see in the board game hobby?
Right. Well, I don't want to be the crazy feminist girlfriend that got forced her way onto the podcast.
You didn't force your way. I dragged you onto the podcast.
But y'all don't really like girls in your games, so that's a real big beef. That there's robots and dudes, but there's not a whole lot of girls and girl-themed games that boys want to play, which I find annoying. Also, you're very into trains and space, which is weird because there's so many other things in the world, and why trains is the one you've settled on. I mean, my 2-year-old nephew also likes trains, so maybe it's just like this deep-seated childhood love. But yeah.
I knew you didn't like the train element of things. I didn't know it was quite so profound.
It's because it's on I feel like every other time when I'm like, oh, what's the game that you guys are reviewing? And I make my random guess for what I think you're going to give it based on literally zero information. I feel like 25% of the time it's a train themed game. And if it's not a train themed game, it's an all men themed game.
Oh, snap. Been put on notice.
It's fine. I mean, it's the industry. Your listeners are women.
Actually, a decent chunk. Yeah, there's a decent chunk on the guild. So anyway, I think some of what you're saying will be music to their ears, and or they will have some suggestions for games that you might want to check out. I don't know.
Because Hanamakoji, it's girls in the art. But have you ever read the box? The whole premise is to attract the geishas to your restaurant. What? Who came up with that? That's like the most obnoxious, like, be the coolest dude and get the most girls. Like, that's the whole theme. It's a great game. I love that game. It is still number 1 on my favorite game. But it literally could have been anything else. It could have been like build the coolest hamburger and used the same techniques. But no, they went with attracting girls as the theme. Feels weird.
And I think it's interesting because it's something that I think we can be blind to in the hobby, that we're so immersed in it that this isn't a theme or these broader things aren't things that we can see. And you'll point out things all the time with box art or with names or, ooh, this box art's hideous or whatever else that don't necessarily always click with me. And it's hard for me to realize sometimes how geared this industry can be towards dudes.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the games that I tend to be drawn to in terms of like appearances and stuff are like the Asian theme games, which is weird because that's not like my MO of like, I don't like anime and animated things and that kind of like kitschy Japanese thing that is very popular among a lot of people. But I think a lot of those games are the most beautiful. Like they tend to just be softer and prettier.
Well, and you like elegant. Yeah, the Azul box, for instance, was one that you really resonated with because of just the look of it.
Yeah, I like pretty games.
All right. That's a good ending point for the most part. I do want to get one prediction from you because we're recording this prior to the episode. The game this week is a game called The Quacks of Quedlinburg. I'm sorry, give me that reaction again.
Good Lord. Who comes up with these names?
Now, wait a minute. You were just critical of games being too based on trains and space. And this is one based on being not a duck, but a witch doctor. Not a witch doctor. It's kind of like a doctor who doesn't know what they're doing in the town of Quedlinburg in Germany. Hence the Quacks of Quedlinburg. You're mixing potions and dropping all sorts of stuff in there. What score am I going to give this game?
Middle to high 4.
Middle to high 4 is the prediction. All right. Fun fact, it's designed by the same guy who did The Mind.
Oh, your favorite game. And I'm surprised you said it that way. That was...
The Mind.
That's much better.
She's all too familiar with some podcastisms that make it into real life. Abby, my girlfriend, it has been a delight. If folks want to get in touch with you, how should they do that?
They shouldn't. Don't do it. Ask Alex, and if he's nice enough, he might pass on the message. But otherwise, don't do it.
All right. That's Abby, my girlfriend. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. It's you. But yeah, thanks for having me.
So there it was. Abby making her Dutchie debut. Sean, as of the time of this recording, you have not heard that segment that I'm referencing and pretending like we just got done with. Anyway, thanks to Abby, my girlfriend, for coming on the show. And that's going to do it, not for the news, but for our random peek inside the Dutchie, because I guess that's what we're doing this week. Let's head on over to some commercials and then, hey, a review. So, Sean, I like recording the podcast with you, but man, it doesn't feel right if I'm not doing it at a proper table. Right now I'm sitting at this dinky square kitchen table. It's kind of cramped. I don't feel like if I needed to roll dice, they just kind of clank around and it just wouldn't be a satisfying experience. So I feel like I could use an upgrade.
Oh, well, perhaps a game topper from our good buddy Berkey would be the right solution to your particular problem, Alex.
Is that right? Well, good thing I actually already have one of those fine things.
Oh, perfect.
And really enjoy using it.
So is this a solution to a problem that you no longer have?
When I move in with my girlfriend Abby, it will be a problem I will no longer have because I'll bring this game topper over here and then I'll have that ready to go either when I'm podcasting or chucking some dice or playing games or whatever else. It can convert the benign kitchen table into a fun gaming experience at a nice, affordable price. And if you order now, every single game topper comes with 5 pounds of Berkey jerky.
Ooh, does it really?
No, I actually don't think that's a deal.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't say that.
Would make me more likely to buy a second one because that jerky, I can't get enough of that jerky in my life.
Mwah! That's all I have to say about Berkey's jerky.
Also, mwah, that's what I have to say about his game toppers. Berkey, you are a mwah kind of guy.
Be sure to check out Game Toppers over at GameToppersLLC.com. So, Alex, do you recall playing the multiplayer worker placement game Yokohama by our fine sponsors over at Tasty Minstrel Games?
Boy, it was so long ago, and yeah, of course I remember. It was an awesome game, Sean. An amazing game.
Yeah, we both enjoyed it quite a bit. So I was excited to hear that Yokohama Duel, which is all the rage nowadays, take an awesome game and then put Duel on it, and now you've got a sweet 2-player game. And I think that's what's going to happen here, don't you?
Oh yeah, no, this looks great.
So this will be coming to Kickstarter in late January of this year, so keep your eyes out for that. Yokohama Duel is a 2-player worker placement game that lasts 4 rounds, with each player taking 4 turns each round. The game includes 10 different areas, and each area can be used only once each round. Workers have certain powers, but they can only be used by people with low power. To gain victory points, players must complete the order form, build shops and trading houses, clear custom goods, and dedicate the church. At the end of the game, whichever player has more points is the winner.
So if you fancy yourself a merchant, you might want to go prepare some funds to invest in a copy of Yokohama Duel, coming soon from Tasty Minstrel Games. Sean, I have so thoroughly mastered the game of Onitama. I can beat all challengers. I cannot be stopped, even by you, even by death itself. But is there anything left for me to do in this game? I feel like I'm so good at it. I just need something more.
Well, Alex, I don't know, because you haven't yet seen my wind spirit.
Your wind spirit?
Yes, my wind spirit. I have a devastating wind spirit, Alex, that all should avoid.
Because the wind spirit gonna mess you up.
All of the new Mexican food, Alex, gives me a ferocious wind spirit.
Well, I don't think that kind of wind spirit is maybe as useful as you're thinking. The wind spirit that comes, though, in the new expansion for Onitama, Way of the Wind, can add some pretty interesting possibilities. It's an impassable piece on the board that can move using certain of the technique cards. Some of those cards will make it very, very, very tricky. You can't move into it, you can't move onto it, but it can move into you, and if it does, it switches places with your piece, and if it does that, it might put you in a pretty vulnerable position. So beware of the wind spirit in Onitama Way of the Wind, now available from fine retailers, from our partners at Arcane Wonders. Step right up, friends. Don't be shy. Come on down. What do you have? Toe fungus? You have herpes? You have cancer? We've got the solution for you. A potion perfect for any ailment. But be careful, some of these might be a little explosive. It's the Quacks of Quedlinburg.
I can't believe you said cancer.
What? You don't think back in the day they would have potions for that?
Jeez. Anyway, Quacks of Quedlinburg also known as the Quacks.and Quedlinburg, which is how I know it, Alex, because I actually have the Schmidt-Spiel German version. So if you don't have the Schmidt-Spiel German version, perhaps you have the U.S. release, which was done by Northstar Games. This was designed by Wolfgang Warsch, with art by Dennis Lohausen, and then also apparently some additional art by Wolfgang himself. This is a push your luck bag building game, I think is the easiest way to describe it. And it plays over the course, is it 9 rounds, Alex? I think it's 9 rounds.
9 rounds. No, yeah, it's 9 rounds.
And of course, it's a Euro game. It's a mid-weight Euro game, maybe light medium, where you're trying to score the most points. And what you're going to do is you're going to, as this alchemist who's trying to sell your wares, you are creating a potion from all these ingredients, trying not to explode in the process. And hopefully getting enough money so that you can buy some additional ingredients and then also score points by having sold your potion. So everyone has their own player board, which is your cauldron, and it's this interesting spiral track. And simultaneously, you're going to pull ingredients out of your bag. And everyone starts with the same ingredients. There are some cherry bombs, which are the negative ingredients, the bad ingredients, and you have 4 of them that are level 1. You have 2 that are level 2 and 1 that's level 3. And then in addition, you have a pumpkin, and then you have the green bug ingredient, and that's what you have to start with. And so you pull one out, and when you pull one out, you first look at the number, and that's how many spaces from the center you're going to place it. So if I pull out a 1 cherry bomb, then I just place it on the next available spot. But if I pull out the 3 cherry bomb, then I move it 3 spaces away. And then the next ingredient that I pull is going to count however many spaces from that last one I placed. And the farther you get along up this spiral track, number 1, the more points you will potentially get. And number 2, the more purchase power you will have during the purchase phase of the game. But here's where it's push your luck. These cherry bombs are bad. And if you ever exceed a value of 8 or more of cherry bombs, so you add up I've got a 3 and a 2, and now I've got 2 1s, I'm at value 7. If I pull another cherry bomb, I'm going to explode. And that immediately ends my ability to pull out additional ingredients. And what that's going to do is that's going to limit me, because now in the next phase, instead of both getting points for how far up the track I've gone and have the ability to get points to purchase things with, I can only choose to do one of those things. So very often you want to avoid exploding if at all possible. Now, there's also going to be a bonus for whoever has gone up farthest the track. There's a die that gives you some incremental bonus. Maybe it gives you a gem or a point or I think a pumpkin, and we could talk about that. But really where this game starts to shine is where we talk about the special abilities of these various ingredients. Because as the game goes on, you're going to be able to purchase additional ingredients. There are bugs, and there are these crow skulls. There are toadstools. There's all sorts of stuff. And they're going to do different things as you place them or at the end when you're evaluating your board. And I should also point out that the ability of all these different ingredients depends on which set you're playing with. So you're always going to use the same ingredients, but there are different books which give different abilities to these ingredients, which adds a ton to the variability here. So just some quick examples. Pumpkins are pretty much always just the value. There's just a 1 pumpkin and that's it. But then there are certain types of toadstools where you can choose to either place it or maybe keep it off the board to be placed at the end of any turn. And so you can kind of store them up if you want. There are some ingredients that might key off of other ingredients. So for example, I forget which one it was, but basically once you place it, if a cherry blossom was placed immediately before it, you can choose to pull that cherry blossom off and put it back into your bag. There is one of the toadstool ones also. It gives you bonuses based on previous pumpkins that you've placed, which is pretty interesting. There's what, 25, 30 different ingredients or options based on what set you're using. So there's a ton of variability here.
Yeah, there's some that are the same. The pumpkins are always pumpkins. Right. The moths always act like moths. But there are certain ingredients. Yeah, there's 4 different sets of the ones that there are unique ones of. So yeah, a lot of different different possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at the end of a round, once you have gained your points, once you have made your purchases, if you're able to do both those things, you're going to wipe your board, you're going to take all your ingredients, put them back into the bag, and then for the next round, you're going to start off doing the same thing. Now, in addition, there are things that might let you collect gems. Gems can be spent to advance the starting point of of your cauldron. Additionally, you can use those to refresh your flask because sometimes if you want to pull back a cherry bomb that you just drew out, you can spend your flask to do so. And it goes back, the cherry bomb goes back in your bag, but then you can't do that again until you've refreshed it. Ultimately, you can go through the 9 rounds, and whoever has the most points in that final round, there's going to be basically your purchase power gets turned into a point for every 5 purchase. So it's really good to be able to not explode and do both things. But ultimately, whoever has the most points is the winner. Oh, and there's events that happen every round, which can kind of spice things up. Ton of stuff going on here for, I think, what is a pretty simple game in a lot of ways. But it can kind of crank up the complexity depending on those ingredients that you have. So anyway, that's a brief overview of how you play the Quacks of Quedlinburg. Alex, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, before I get too deep into things, let me mention that this was indeed a review copy for me, provided by Northstar Games. So thanks to Bruce and that whole crew over there. All right, Quacks of Quedlinburg initial thoughts. So my initial thoughts on this game were, I played this thing very, very, very wrong. Because in this game, there is a built-in catch-up mechanic, which works pretty well. How far behind you are on the score track, you'll get a bonus it's the rat bonus, basically, is what you'll get, rat tails bonus. We were playing with that as a runaway leader mechanic and not a catch-up mechanic. And boy, oh boy, Sean, you can imagine how that did not make the game fun.
Yep.
Bad way to play. Very bad way to play. However, in playing with the proper rules, in playing with the proper set, and in playing with everything as it should be, I have really gotten into this game, Sean. And just about every play has been a pretty enjoyable one. I think it's a good sign with these kinds of games when you are adding sort of theme and flavor and character to the game that isn't necessarily there. The example I'll give is, in one of the sets, I don't know which set, there is an ability with the yellow ones, whatever those are. I don't know what that yellow ingredient is, where when you play it, whatever ingredient follows it doubles in how far it goes. So if it's a 1 chip that gets drawn, it moves forward 2 spaces. If it's a 2, it moves forward 4. A 3 chip moves forward 6 spaces. And during that game, that chip was exclusively referred to by me as a springy boy.
Okay.
So it's unusual that I will give some sort of extra flavor or whatever else, and be like, ooh, I just drew another springy boy, or oh, why aren't my springy boys coming out, or whatever else. And whenever you get that kind of flair or flavor or that little extra added to the game, that absorption, that's a pretty good sign for an enjoyment level of the game. I am pretty pleased with how this is played. I think it actually plays a pretty wide audience. I am surprised this was in the Kennerspiel category based off of the plays I've had. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sean, but it's light with a decent amount of depth, with a good amount of variability, and there's not really a whole lot to dislike about this game. We'll talk about some parts where it may have fallen short, but honestly, I can't think of much negative at this stage of the review. What about you, Sean?
So to make a point on your Kennerspiel analysis there, yeah, I think we've talked a lot about how the Kennerspiel seems to have, or the games that get nominated for Kennerspiel seems to have gotten lighter and lighter as time goes on. And I think that this seems appropriate for where the weight of it for where the Kennerspiel has been. So I'll say this. This was not a review copy for me. This was a copy that I got a long time ago. When it first came out in Germany, I paid to have it shipped over from Amazon.de because I've done that in the past where I want to get some of these nominees so that we can play them and talk about them on the show when they're in the nomination process. And for whatever reason, I looked at it and I looked at the rules and I was like, I don't think, this doesn't look interesting to me. And it just kind of got backburnered for quite a while. And finally, after the US release with Northstar, you and I talked about getting it to the table for a featured review. So, boy, do I regret not having played this sooner, because I think this game is really good. Like I've mentioned, it's fairly light. I'd call this a light medium Euro, but it does a lot of things right, and I really enjoyed all of my play experiences of this. And that's going to also be kind of tempered by the fact that I'm dealing with a German version, and I'll kind of I think that needs to be clear context for my review. And so there are some things I may not be able to comment on as much as you, Alex. But yeah, overall, I think that this was a fantastic game. And I think for the weight of the Kennerspiel, I'm glad that, for what it is, I'm glad that this won. So, rulebook. So Alex, I have not seen the English rulebook myself. I don't believe Northstar has an official English, like the PDF of the English rulebook online. So I was going off of an English translation of the German. What are your thoughts on the rulebook?
It's pretty clean. And actually, I think there's a lot in this game that tries to make learning the game really simple. It has your starting pot set up on your board. It has what happens if your pot explodes on your board. It has a lot of these great little rules reminders baked into the components of the game. The tiles themselves have iconography that is clearly explained in the book. It does a really good job of walking you through how to play this. And not that it's a very hard game to play, right? It's throw chips in a bag, draw chips out of the bag. Don't draw too many. There aren't a ton of mechanical rules to get into, but where it's needed, it's explained clearly and reinforced by the components themselves. So I think and we'll talk a bit about components, but from a teaching people how to play and learning how to play perspective, I think it does a great job on all fronts.
And so what I did, rather than read the translation that I had, because I know you had said that there were some issues that you had in a prior play, I just wanted to make sure that I got it from a reputable source. So I actually went on to YouTube and I watched Rodney Smith's Watch It Played how-to of this, and then reinforced that with the rulebook. And so Rodney did an excellent job as always. And so that's how I learned to play, but I can't really comment on the rulebook. But moving into components art, like you said, I agree that there were a lot of helpful helpful reminders on the components about certain things. Although in our first play of it, me, Matthew, and Matt, we didn't notice any of those. And so in the second game that I'd played of this, we had added in Eugene, and I was looking things up in the rulebook for setup, and Eugene's like, it's right here, right in front of you. And so that was kind of our joke through the rest of that particular game was, it's right there, everyone can see it. So yeah, I agree with you. Now, keep in mind, I had, again, the German copy, and there's some slight component differences. So for example, Alex, in the Northstar version, what are the player colors?
Oh, I think it's red, blue, yellow, green. I think it's kind of the standard 4.
Yeah. Yeah, we had silver, brown, gold, and tan. And
well, all right.
And I think that was an excellent choice by Northstar, because there's something about like the primary colors, right? Unless you're colorblind, and that's got its other issues, but for non-colorblind people, it's really easy for me to remember who was red, who was blue. But when you have these like very muted, like earthy tones as your player colors, I could not, like, who is tan? And like, because brown and tan are pretty close. And then you've got the gold, which is pretty close to both. And it was very confusing and not at all. It was bad. It was bad. So good job, Northstar, making that decision to go with traditional primary type colors.
Yeah, no doubt. And why don't let's morph right into art and components. What did you think about the presentation of this game, the look and feel of this game, Sean?
Well, other than the player colors, I think it looks pretty good on the table. You've got solid components with the ingredient chips. It's standard, Euro cardboard quality chits. And everyone's got their it's a good sized player board. There's a smaller board that goes in the center. It's not something that would necessarily catch my eye as I was walking past it in a convention or anything, but I think it looks well enough on the table, or looks good enough on the table. And I think overall, it's Dennis Lohausen, and we've sometimes he's been hit or miss, more hits than misses, but I think it's good here.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily in love with the art style. It was preserved from the European version to the US version, and I think the art style, it doesn't necessarily fit the feel of this game. The feel of this game can be very not necessarily wacky, but pretty fun. I mean, Press Your Luck is an inherently fun mechanic. It's you're gonna dare, you're gonna go, huh? You're gonna stop, you're gonna like it's very. I wouldn't say it's not thinky, right? There's an element of thinking about odds and chance and whatever else, but there's also an element of gut feel and gut reaction that's inherent in a Press Your Luck game that I don't know if it's totally communicated by that style or the art and look of the game. I think it's not my favorite, but I don't think it drags the game down. And honestly, beyond that, I think the only thing I ran into art or components wise is every now and then, not often, I would place my thing on the wrong side of the track. So I might start moving in the opposite direction on the potion track, I guess, whatever you would call that, the pot track. Or I would skip a ring. But I actually think it's pretty well designed. So I don't think it's a common thing. But it is something that I did notice in at least a couple of my plays that I accidentally did.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I wouldn't say it's something that I was blown away with, the look of it, but it certainly doesn't detract. Right. And I always love when a game reinforces the rules with the components, and the iconography here is fairly clear, and where it's not, it's decently well explained to where people can remember how a certain chip works in a certain set. So, yeah, not really a ton of complaints. I thought a cool touch was how they did the different sets of cards, where you have the bookmark tabs on the bottom. I got a little bit confused searching for that at first, but when I uncovered how it worked, it was a cool little touch. Well,
I mean, gameplay-wise, and we've already kind of talked a decent amount about gameplay, which I think is an interesting thing because I think that means that the art and components have interwoven into the gameplay so well. But like you've mentioned, the Press Your Luck aspect of the game, I think, is where this is most exciting. You have, what do we say, 4, 6, 7 of the cherry blossom tiles in your bag to start. You have several 1s, some 2s, and a 3. And at the halfway point of the game, more or less, you'll actually add in an additional 1 because ideally you're thinning them out in the sense that you're adding more of other ingredients to your bag. So you should, in theory, be drawing them less often. But it's certainly, it's kind of nerve-wracking as you're getting closer, as you're at, maybe I'm at 4 now, and my 3 hasn't come out. So now I'm at 5, and I know that if I draw the 3, I've busted. I'm out, and that's going to put me behind. But if the 3's already out, then you're like, oh, I've got a little bit of breathing room, right? And so sometimes I was even happy to have an early 3 cherry blossom come out because that's 3 ahead that it's advanced me, and that uncertainty of a big cherry blossom swing isn't going to hit me as bad.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and having it's weird when you like having those big chips out early because it can feel kind of frustrating when you have those rounds where it seems like all you're drawing is cherry blossoms. That's it. That's all you're drawing. But in terms of kind of tactics and how you're thinking about the game does things to where drawing those big chips cannot feel so bad, cannot be such a feel-bad moment. For instance, to go back to it, hey, the Springy Boy. You get to move forward 6 spaces off of a 3 chip if those are played in the proper sequence. Now, you don't have a ton of choices to whether they're played in the proper sequence, but when it happens, it feels really cool.
Yeah, and by the way, we called the Springy Boys, or I called them Demon Carrots.
Demon Carrots. Okay, yeah, that works. Well, and they were only called Springy Boys in the context of that one specific set. So just throwing that out there. Now, Sean, I am actually surprised because I didn't think you would find enough depth in this game to kind of capture your attention. What is it about this that has it work for you where other kind of mid-weight or medium-light Euros have fallen short?
Well, I think the speed of the game is pretty impressive. Right? It's about a 45 minute game once everyone knows what they're doing. So that's different than an hour and a half, 2-hour game, right? Also, for the most part, you're playing simultaneously. And in the last round, you play simultaneously still, but you're doing one pull at a time, whereas everyone just kind of does a free-for-all before that. And you can elect to do that in the earlier rounds if you want, where you're each pulling one thing at a time and resolving them simultaneously, but that does slow the game down. So I think, like I said, the speed is definitely an important factor. And I'll agree with you that, yeah, it is kind of surprising because there aren't necessarily a lot of meaningful decisions. Now, there can be, depending on the ingredients, right? But ultimately, you're just pulling a bag or a chip from the bag and you place and you don't have a lot of control there. So here's where you're making decisions. If I have the option to buy ingredients, which ones am I buying? And you can only ever buy at most 2 in a turn, and they have to be different ingredients. And by the way, you could buy, some of them have level 1s, some of them have level 2, some of them have level 4s. So you have some choice there, and they get pretty expensive as you go up. So there's that choice. There's the choice of, well, I busted this turn, so do I get points or do I get ingredient buys? And that can be a difficult decision. And then also, of course, do I keep drawing from my bag knowing that there's a good chance that I'll bust or not? Some of the ingredients will give you a decision. Like, for example, one of the skull ingredients, I think, will let you pull out up to a certain number of chips in your bag and then immediately place one, returning the others to the bag so that you have a little bit more control of that. But yeah, for the most part, you're kind of along for the ride. And in a press your luck style game, I am fine with that. You think of, like, in my mind, the quintessential press your luck is, what is it? The roll 4 dice, can't stop, right? Like, you don't have a lot of choice in that game, right? But it's a ton of fun. It's super simple. It's super quick, but there's just something super compelling about that. And I think that this does that with a Euro skin on top of it.
What I think has it work is there are interesting decisions you're making. You can buy in very different ways, right? You can focus on having moths in your bag so that you get some bonus droplet advancement. You get this bonus boost. You can focus on building your bag, just stuffing it full of pumpkins. I saw someone do that in one of our plays, where they at almost any opportunity would try and get pumpkin. And that can work to an extent, though you probably want some more interesting abilities. But yeah, thinning your bag out so that the cherry blossoms come up less often is certainly a valid strategy. And depending on what set you're working with, there are other interesting strategies and choices that come up where, you know, maybe you, there was one, what are the purple bug ones called? I don't know what those are, Sean.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember what they're called.
In one of the sets, there's an ability where if you have them in your pot, you can choose to sell them for other chips and points in advancement.
Right. So
if you draw enough of them at one time, there's a cool bonus you're going to get out of that. Or in certain sets, there's the black chip, not the moth. I think it's, or more gray, whatever that chip is, the skull chip.
Yeah.
You get what I would call the See the Future ability, where you get to draw chips and choose to place one of them or not. So there's different pathways and different strategies that kind of get melded into this. And then what's cool is you get the events. The events are really, I found, very satisfying in this game, Sean.
Yeah, so yes and no. So on the events, some of them were very symmetrical. Like, everyone gets a ruby isn't particularly interesting. And I'd say about a third of them are very symmetrical, where it's like, okay, cool. But yeah, I would say the other 2/3 are pretty interesting.
I mean, you get things that extend the catch-up mechanic. For instance, hey, double the number of rat tails, double the benefit that'll get you in terms of catching up in this. So that can be a pretty interesting one. But you'll also get things like the number to bust on this time is 1 higher.
Right.
Which I think makes for an interesting round. We had that on the final round in one of our games come up, and everyone but me drew out the pot, and I stopped. And if I'd kept drawing, I kind of did this after the game, I would have not only drawn out my pot, but won the game.
Sure.
Sean, this is a good a time as any to mention. I really enjoy this game, despite the fact that I am absolute garbage at it. Absolutely terrible. I cannot tell you how frequently I end up pulling just one more chip or just going a little too far or not going far enough. I can't quite get it right, but man, I've enjoyed trying. I have enjoyed trying to get it right and failing miserably. So I think that's also a good sign for a game when, at least for me, when I'm terrible at it and still enjoy it.
And I will agree with you that, yes, there are choices in terms of the strategy, because you have to decide what path you're going down. Because at least from what I've seen, you can't do a lot of all of the ingredients because there are some that really focus on each other. And then there's also an element of, shoot, this person's getting a bunch of this type, and this checks at the end of the round if that person has drawn more of that type than others, and then they get a bonus. So then there's a little bit of tit for tat. They buy one, so now you have to buy one. But as far as the tactical choices, I'll stand by that in terms of there's not a lot of decisions, and you do feel like you're along for the ride. Like, for example, I never feel clever in this game, which is something I like a lot because it's just the way in which I drew it, right? Like, it may be if I draw ingredient X before Y, I'm going to get some bonus, but I keep drawing Y before X, and so there's no big thing that happens. And you don't have necessarily a lot of control over that. But for whatever reason, I'm okay with that in this game.
I completely agree with you that you don't feel clever, but sometimes you definitely do feel stupid.
Oh yeah. And that maybe that's kind of interesting too. Maybe that's the opposite of it, and I enjoy that, and I enjoy the absence of feeling stupid sometimes.
Fair enough. Yeah. I think it succeeds on that front. I think absolutely. Absolutely, Sean.
Absolutely.
I'm on board. Absolutely. So, yeah, anything else on gameplay? Is there enough interaction to keep you satisfied in this game?
Yeah. Well, let me think. No, I think for the most part, well, yeah. No, because the interaction is twofold. It's kind of those tit-for-tat ingredients that you want to make sure someone doesn't get too many of. Then there's also watching where others are getting, and because that bonus die for whoever has advanced the most on their track at the end of the round is pretty helpful, especially if it's giving you pumpkins or if it's giving you rubies. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that. But for the most part, there's not a whole lot more interaction. I mean, I guess in theory, in like a 4-player game with purchases, you could run out of particular ingredient value. But I don't recall that actually happening, even in a 4-player game. So
now here's the other thing: player count. I have played this at 3 and 4, but I didn't play it at 2.
Yes.
Does this work at 2?
It does. I played it at all player counts. I think 3 is probably the sweet spot, but 2 and 4 were not terrible. I think they were quite good at 2 and 4. So I think it works at all play counts, and I will happily play it at any of them. Maybe it was a little less interesting at 2, but I'd still play it at 2. Raquel really liked it at 2. So in fact, she's been asking to play it additional times since the couple that we played it 2.
All right. Now this is as good a place as any before we get into theme and guild thoughts, and not a ton of guild thoughts. This one hasn't. I don't know if this one has disseminated as widely as past Kennerspiel winners have for whatever reason, and I don't know why that may be. Because, for instance, Concordia absolutely caught fire and stayed around with gamers. But I'm gonna go through and look at past Kennerspiel winners, and we can kind of talk through the staying power of this. I think this is as good a time as any to dig through that. So last year's Kennerspiel winner, Exit the Game, which was kind of a weird one. Also nominated that year, Terraforming Mars, and obviously Terraforming Mars has had the greater staying power between the two. Raiders of the North Sea has also stuck around a decent chunk. So both that was a pretty solid crop, and arguably the one with the least staying power to a degree is the one that won. 2016, you had Isle of Skye. I've still seen that one on the table. Pandemic Legacy and Time Stories were still up. Is Time Stories still a thing? Is that thing still going strong?
If you ask Draft Mechanic, I think they'll say yes.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. You have in 2015 Broom Service. I think that one hasn't necessarily stuck as much. You had Elysium. Man, oh man, I wish they had an expansion for that. And Orleans has been the one that has had the most staying power. And then 2014, this is as far back as makes sense to go. Istanbul, Rococo, and Concordia. And out of those three, Concordia has been the one that I still see at conventions all the time. Istanbul, a little less so. The three this year, Sean, were Heaven and Ale, Ganz Schön Clever, and Quacks of Quedlinburg. Gone Shown Clever, I think, has shown pretty good staying power, and the fact that it already has spawned a sequel is a pretty strong sign for it. Do you think Quacks has that same kind of staying power? Do you think we'll still be talking about this game 2, 3, 4 years from now?
Yeah, that's difficult to predict. And I am a little concerned that it hasn't seen as much traction here in the U.S. as of now. I would have thought, especially coming from Northstar, we may have seen a little bit more traction. So I don't know. I mean, my guess is probably no, which I think would be a shame because I think this game is quite good. And I think it's quite accessible to a lot of different types of gamers.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it has a pretty good fit. And I don't know what would need to change to have the game be exposed to more folks. Maybe the name is throwing some folks off. Quacks of Quedlinburg is certainly a very odd name in English. And the look of it, I don't think communicates the fun of it as much as it maybe could. But I don't know. The game itself is rock solid. And you're right. It plays well with gamers. And I think it would play well as a gateway game. I think you could just about play this thing with anyone. Yeah. Other than, I don't think Chewy's going to play so well in this, maybe.
So I thought about it. I thought about some of the more basic ones, the more basic sets of ingredients, because actually games I have played in the last week or two, which I didn't mention earlier, were with Chewy. Chewy and I played Splendor, where we just played with the first level cards, and then we also played Suro, and she was doing pretty good. She might be able maybe like if we did no event cards and some just very basic ingredients and maybe not all the ingredients, maybe. But yeah, not the full game, not yet. But she's also not even 5 yet, so that's all right.
Give her some time.
Yeah.
She'll be gaming before you know it.
I'll give her 2 weeks.
She'll be playing as the space prosecutor in Space Court before you know it. So theme. Let's quickly talk about theme. Do you feel like a doctor stirring up a strange, bizarre potion in this game?
Well, yeah, a little bit. So here is the theme, right? Once every year, the city of Quedlinburg, which, by the way, is a city, I think, in northern Germany, they hold a 9-day bazaar within its city walls. The country's best miracle doctors and quack surgeons gather in one place to showcase their healing remedies. Smelly feet, homesickness, hiccups, and lovesickness, they have a cure for everything. So I'll say this. I don't feel like you're a quack charlatan doctor selling his or her wares at the bazaar necessarily. It's not like what's the one I'm thinking? Dungeon Pets, right? Where you're breeding these dungeon monsters and you are selling them, but it's a much more complex game, and this is much more abstracted, and it's much shorter and quicker, obviously. But I do feel like the idea of you being this mad alchemist that's just throwing things in the pot and seeing what comes out, I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think the concept is there, and I don't know if I necessarily fully feel the theme, but I do get immersed in the game. I do get immersed in what's going to come out next? Okay, I have a 3 and a 2 in here that I could bust on, but I think I have 5 other chips if I'm feeling around in here. Should I go for this? Should I not go? Oh, man, I don't know if I have the rubies to refill my potion. What stage are we at the game? I don't know. And I get immersed in the game, but I don't know if I necessarily get as immersed in the theme of the ingredients, but I think it's there. I don't think it's an thematic game. It's there. It's just not the biggest selling point for this one for me. So yeah, that doesn't keep it from being any more or less fun, but yeah, I think that's worth noting. So Sean, that's our look through it. There aren't any guild thoughts on this, so let's head on to our final thoughts and rating. And we rate everything here at the Dukes of Dice on a 6-point scale, 1 being bad, very bad, 6 being amazing, top 10 material. Sean, where does this one come in for you?
What do you think I'm going to give this, Alex?
Oh, this is tricky. So prior to hearing your initial thoughts when we jumped on for this recording, I thought this would have a chance of getting a 3, maybe a 4. And now I'm thinking you're somewhere between a 4 and a 5. I don't think it quite rises to a 6, but I think you really enjoyed this game. So if I had to pick one, I think you're going to lean to 4.
Okay. Well, it's definitely not a 6. It's definitely not a 3. It is a 5, Alex. A great game will rarely turn down a play of it. And let me tell you why. Or let me tell you what's how I know that. So I have the German version, which means that I have printed out right now on 8.5 by 11 paper, I have translations for all the different types of ingredients, for the different cards. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go the full, do everything I need to do to get paste ups done, to do color printouts so that we don't have to keep referring back to the translations, because I want this to be a much more seamless experience, because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to see more play of this game. And I want to see more play of this game. I want to play this more. I want to introduce this to more people. And I'm hoping that a year from now, when we do our double take, that there will be more guild thoughts, because people will have been intrigued by our review and will go check it out, because I think it's a really good game. Especially when it's been, the last year I've been down on mid-weight Euros, although this is a little bit lighter. I just think that the press your luck aspect of this is really fun. It's quick. It's easy to teach. It's a really good game. And I've seen how excited Raquel has been to play it. I think that there's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to play it. By the way, I was hoping to get around to it earlier in the week. There's an alternate version. You didn't get a chance to play that, did you?
Now, the alternate version, you're talking about the other side of the board where it has the 2 different Ruby tracks, or it has the 2 different droplet tracks?
Correct.
Yes, I have played that.
Oh, why didn't we talk about that? I haven't played that.
Oh, okay. I don't know how I feel about that one, because it feels like you should focus on just one or just the other. It feels like splitting up your droplet movement doesn't make a ton of sense in that. And I've played one of that game, and basically everyone only took the bottom droplet track. So I'm perfectly fine not having that option and just playing with that, but I'm glad it's an option at least.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's my score. It is really a very solid 5, a great game. We'll rarely turn down a play of it. And again, I think the play time really helps with that.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Sean, I'm going to have to echo you in a large part with this one, because every time I've played this, I've gotten into it, and gotten into it in a way that only smacks of a 5. A great game. Will rarely turn down a play of it. And I can't think of many situations where I'm going to poo-poo something like Quacks of Quedlinburg. It's got enough strategy to keep you interested, but it's got enough fun to really have you want to play this more and more. And it has enough variability where the game experiences aren't going to feel stale, because, hey, just play with a different set. Hey, try a different strategy this time. Maybe the event cards will come up in a way that'll have the play experience feel fresh. And I think there's a lot to love in this box. It's a stellar 3 or 4 player game. The only maybe small thing I guess I wish is that I think it would be really cool if there were 5 players as an option, but the fact that there isn't doesn't hold the game back so much that I'm too worried about it. I may try this at 2 in the future, but it's one I anticipate having around for a good amount of time. I've enjoyed my plays of this so far, and it's one I think I'm going to introduce to Abby, because I think she'll actually pretty much dig this one too. So, yeah.
Well, Alex, in fact, I believe there is an announced expansion, and I'm pretty sure it's going to have a 5th player components for it.
Oh, well, there you go. Then my wish has already come true.
There you go.
Wolfgang Warsch has heard me. Wolfgang Warsch has heard my pleas. And by the way, Sean, Wolfgang Warsch is absolutely on fire. I mean, to have we knew this at the time when we were talking about 2 Kennerspiel nominees, 1 winner, and 1 Spiel nominee, which was my absolute favorite game of last year. I am gotta say, I mean, he has a 6 and 2 5s under his belt in my book, and I hear Doppelt so clever is even better than Ganz schon clever.
Interesting.
Oh man, he is easily in my top 6 designers. Certainly in the 1 or 2 of the hottest designers out there right now. I'm really curious to see what he comes out with next.
Yeah, me too. Definitely. All right, well, that's going to do it for our review of the Quacks of Quedlinburg, or Die Quacksilber von Quedlinburg, depending on which copy you have. 2 very solid 5s from both Alex and Sean.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, finally on the Dukes of Dice, we have the Dukes Double Take, and we are looking back at Ex Libris. This was in episode 166, Duchy Decimal System, and this was a game that was red hot a couple of Gen Cons ago from Renegade Games, a game about libraries. Sean, you gave this one a 3. You said it had a lot of elements you enjoy, and you said the game was better than the score would indicate, but you just don't know if you'd be looking to bring this one out after playing enough times for the review. I also gave this one a 3, and I also said it was better than a 3 would indicate, but the end game and the result of things was a little unsatisfying, and I was really thrown for a loop by the small text size present in the game. Thought that was something that really held back some of the components and held back the play experience. Sean, have you played this one since?
No, I haven't, Alex. And, thinking back about what I said, this is a good game. It's a solid game. It is a pretty interesting medium weight worker placement game with some set collection, and there's some set ordering. And so there's some interesting stuff going on, and I think it's pretty thematic, and I think that it's really entertaining as you're reading all the titles of these books. Like they're funny and they're clever. But yeah, ultimately it just doesn't rise above a 3 for me, which is game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation. But I think that if you're less cynical than me, definitely go check it out.
So Sean, I have played this. I played it an additional time over at Jamie's Game Night in the past year, and thoughts didn't really change. There's something that's really cool about that alphabetization system. I think I got that right eventually, and the worker placement can work, and some of the spaces are interesting, and the game just isn't quite tight enough to be as satisfying as I'd like, and it's held back by a couple of graphical issues with it in terms of the text size. It's still really difficult for me to play it in an enjoyable way. And so as a result, this was one that actually did make its way out of my collection. In fact, recently on the Guild, I did a Belong Somewhere Else in the Duchy where I offered 13 potentially different games and picked 3 winners. And they got to pick of the list of 13 games. And how this worked is I'd have whoever won first obviously got their first pick. Second place got to pick their first and second place, and then whichever one was the higher one left over would get it, and then the third place got first, second, and third, and again, highest left over is the game that they would get. And Ex Libris was on 2 of those lists, and I think Ex Libris was pretty well in demand among those titles, so I think it's one that's intrigued a lot of gamers still. It obviously had a lot of love when it came out, and ultimately the first place winner, Alex from Santa Fe, interestingly enough, picked Ex Libris as their game of choice to bring into their collection out of a wide array of options, including steamrollers and space base and some others. So I think this game has had some degree of staying power and intrigue, probably because the theme itself is so unique, and again the loving detail, the loving way the theme was integrated, but the game itself just fell short for me. And so I'm happy it has a better home somewhere else, but it certainly doesn't rise any higher than what it was before. It's going to stay at a 3 for me as well.
And it's interesting, as hot as this game was, and I feel like we had a lot of guild participation last year about this game. There was really only one thought that we had in our guild about this, and that was Ned Meyer. He said, Ex Libris is a great game. There definitely were some problems with the layout, but overall it was a quick play that allowed for lots of strategies. We also loved all the book puns and jokes. We've only played it once, but I'd gladly play it many more times, and he gave it a 4 out of 6 on our ducal scale.
And I think that's a reasonable score, and I think you're going to have plenty of people who will feel similarly to that. It is a game that I think for some will be a true winner and a hit that will come out time and time again. But I just haven't found that to be the experience with the game groups and folks I've tried to play it with. So we'll see what kind of long-term staying power it has. But yeah, for now, I'm okay not having it in my collection anymore.
Yeah, I feel like it should be a 4.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah, it should be a 4, and it just isn't.
I think if there were an objective score where we took out, I don't know, never mind. It is what it is. It's a 3 for both of us. So that is Ex Libris from Renegade Games, 3 and a 3.
And finally, before we wrap up on this lovely Saturday afternoon, well, not so lovely here. It's still pretty cloudy and gloomy. The rest of our top 6 names. Let's start off with the name father, Steve O'Rourke, with Stir Until Incorporated. And his way of framing that is Abby and I are moving in together in about a month and a half, And it's sort of this ingredient or this instruction that comes up a lot in recipes, stir until incorporated, referencing, again, the potions you're stirring in Quacks of Quedlinburg.
And then Nick Hayes suggested the Ducks of Dice, which when you hear the Quacks of Quedlinburg, I think what you were talking about, Alex, like people may hear that title and not know what it's about. Is this a game about ducks? Is this a duck game? So I appreciate, because that's kind of my thought, right? Quacks, right? But no, Ducks of Dice, Nick Hayes, good job.
Well, and there were also some DuckTales references that made their way onto the guild. So, woo. DuckTales, woo. Anyway, love that theme. Jimmy DM90 suggested Quack Open a Book. Solid. Ex Libris, and of course Quacks. Pretty readily incorporated there.
That was probably my second choice.
Yeah, it was a good name.
Yeah. And then Ocean Gur suggested Abby Normal. We'll play on Abnormal.
Solid. Referencing the interview you heard earlier that Sean has yet to hear as of the time of this recording, but will hear when he edits this. And finally, John Knost with Explosion of Literacy, referencing the exploding potions in Quacks of Quedlinburg, not to be confused with Potion Explosion is multiplayer solitaire, and literacy referencing Ex Libris.
Well, perfect. Thanks again to all of those contributions from all of our awesome members over on our Board Game Geek Guild. And if you want to contribute as well, you can go on over there to Board Game Geek. We're guild number 2008. Well, Alex, I think that's going to do it for this episode. So thanks again, everyone, for listening. This has been Dukes of Dice, episode 193, Cooking the Books. Thanks again to Jesse Metcalf for naming that episode. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on January 19th, 2019. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, and Game Toppers, LLC. You can check out all of TMG's awesome titles at PlayTMG.com. Arcane Wonders find games at ArcaneWonders.com. And learn more about Game Toppers at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on!